Modern Britain often wrestles with its borders. Over the last decade, political debates have been dominated by a desire for isolation, culminating in leaving the European Union to close the island off from the continent. Yet, looking at the island's deep history, the foundational pillars of British culture are actually borrowed, stolen, and imposed by foreigners. The English language is a mashup of Germanic dialects and French vocabulary. The monarchy traces its lineage to Scandinavian warlords. Even the basic legal frameworks are a patchwork stitched together from centuries of successive invasions. How did a vulnerable island, defined for millennia by being violently overtaken, eventually reverse its fate to become the largest empire in human history? The geography of the United Kingdom is its defining paradox. Being an island first made it an inescapable target, then a simmering pressure cooker, and finally an isolated launching pad to project power across the globe. Thousands of years ago, Britain was physically connected to the European mainland. Early hunter-gatherers could simply walk across. But as the last ice age ended, sea levels rose, flooding the land bridge and trapping the inhabitants on a newly formed island. This isolated landmass eventually caught the Roman Empire's eye. They crossed the channel and seized control, laying down extensive road networks and building heavy stone walls to establish fortified settlements like Londinium, what we now call London. When the Roman Empire withdrew to handle its collapse, they left behind a massive power vacuum. This invited centuries of violent raids and eventual settlement by Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, turning the island into a fractured battleground of rival kingdoms. The defining climax came with the Norman Conquest of 1066. William the Conqueror crossed from France, brutally overthrowing the Anglo-Saxon leadership. The Normans imposed French-speaking elites and the feudal system, a rigid social hierarchy, stripping peasants of land rights, forcing them to labor for foreign lords. This relentless arrival of disparate cultures, trapped together on one island, created a highly volatile, hybrid society. To control it, the Normans built massive stone fortresses, setting the stage for explosive internal conflict. With the island's borders finally solidified by the surrounding ocean, external invasions largely stopped. The diverse factions living there were now forced into centuries of internal struggle over who actually controlled the state. We can see the first major mechanism to check the absolute power of the monarch in this document, the Magna Carta. Signed in 1215, it established foundational human laws and legally bound the king to his subjects. Massive social shocks further disrupted this hierarchy. When the Black Death devastated Europe, it wiped out millions in Britain. The sudden lack of workers gave the surviving peasant class unexpected economic leverage, allowing them to demand higher wages and travel for better conditions. These power struggles culminated in the 17th century with the English Civil War. The conflict was so severe it resulted in the execution of King Charles I, permanently stripping the monarchy of absolute rule and establishing parliamentary power in its place. By surviving centuries of intense internal pressure and definitively resolving the balance of power, the island transformed. It evolved from a chaotic battleground into a politically stabilized nation. With internal politics finally stabilized, the country experienced a sudden, explosive technological leap known as the Industrial Revolution. This mechanism is Thomas Newcomen's steam engine. By harnessing the island's massive natural coal reserves, this machine mastered steam power, replacing muscle and water wheels with heavy iron pistons and gears. Steam power immediately revolutionized manufacturing. In the textile industry, small rural workshops were rapidly replaced by massive urban factories, where complex machines mass-produced cheap clothing around the clock. This production spike created a problem, an insatiable need for raw resources and new consumer markets. This economic imperative drove the British Empire's aggressive expansion. The once conquered island pushed its military outward, securing territories by force and monopolizing global trade. The hybrid population had successfully weaponized its industrial advantage. They conquered a quarter of the earth, shifting the global balance of power and becoming the undisputed leaders of the modern world. That dominance sharply reversed in the 20th century. While Britain emerged victorious from 2 world wars, the devastating financial and human costs left the nation completely drained. The financially exhausted empire began to rapidly fracture. Across the globe, major colonies, most notably India, organized, demanded their independence, and successfully dismantled British rule. With its overseas territories gone, Britain pivoted inward. The government replaced imperial ambitions with the creation of the modern welfare state, establishing the National Health Service in 1948 to provide free healthcare for its citizens. To rebuild the post-war nation, former colonial subjects migrated back to the UK. Ships like the Empire Windrush brought people from across the globe, bringing the sheer diversity of the empire directly onto the island. Through all this rapid geopolitical contraction and social change, the modern monarchy provided a steady cultural continuity, serving as a symbolic anchor for a nation redefining its place in the world. The physical empire eventually dissolved, leaving behind a global landscape defined by British legal frameworks and a universal language. The island's history is a record of a culture that found its strength in being colonized, then refined that strength through the intense pressure of its own borders.